Welcome, welcome. The ending of a story usually consists of a few elements to satisfy the audience. So, for this tale that I've begun to weave, there has to be a denouement for you, dear listener. But also, perhaps, people close to me would like some answers, and certainly for myself. For I too am observant of my own life, an audience member in the front row seat located behind my eyes, a cinema of my own mind in a movie theater with legs, watching it unfold in front of me with greater detail than anyone else. The director's commentary on the director's commentary. So, for an ending, we need a resolution to the conflict, tie up any loose ends, character growth, emotional closure, some thematic reinforcement, why not? And maybe a surprise twist. And a sense of continuation. So let's see if we can achieve that in this final episode. Welcome to the Art of the Covenant. So, what was the story again? If this were a movie and I had to pitch it, I would need a log line. That's a one sentence pinch, a little pinch, but also a pitch that you could efficiently blurt out if you briefly met a producer in an elevator. Well, after experiencing complete memory loss, a suicidal comedian embarks on a journey across the world to rediscover himself and his sense of humor through the landscapes and people he encounters, hoping to find a reason to live, love, and laugh again. Ah, now, that's not necessarily the story I want to tell, but these are the cards I was dealt. That morning I woke up with amnesia, a day difficult to forget. So let's take things step by step. A resolution to the conflict. As was asked in the first episode, why was I sent to the cuckoo's nest? Was it a psychological breakdown, or could it have been a breakthrough? Did I reach some spiritual apotheosis, which has now made religious language just part of my day to day? Was I really face to face with God? Albeit briefly, and that's what blew my mind? Or did aliens mess with my neurons and maybe do all sorts of kinky sexual things to me? Or am I just crazy? It's a strong possibility. I've attempted to answer these questions in the past 11 episodes, and if you've followed me on this journey so far, I thank you, and I hope you can appreciate and forgive me for not having a definite answer. I don't think it matters anymore. Constantly looking for the catalyst, the spark that started it all, is illusory to me. As I look back at the chronological steps to this present moment, one could feasibly return all the way to the Big Bang for a reason. Just look at the conflicts occurring around the world today, Ukraine and Russia. Motivations for starting a war is a complex mix of security concerns, regional dominance, historical grievances, and opposition to Ukraine's growing integration with the West. These factors combined to provoke the invasion, which has since become a protracted and devastating conflict, forcing surrounding countries to get involved, hoping to avoid an escalation, yet unsure how that can feasibly happen. Israel and Palestine bleeding out into Hamas and Hezbollah and bordering countries of the Middle East. I kill you because you killed me. Well, I kill you because you killed me. Someone who's called a terrorist is a hero with another group. Was the girl on fire, Katniss Everdeen, a terrorist? Huh? Was Thanos really all that bad? Was the French Revolution a success? It's too soon to tell. A perpetual eye for an eye with no clear cause. The younger generation angry because their parents are angry. Some rage against recent attacks. Others from occurrences years ago. Few from animosity spanning generations ago. And sprinkling, a little sprinkling, adamant of their self-righteousness because it's written in texts thousands of years old. Is all of this really happening because of Cain and Abel? Ugh. My poetic nature, mixed with the oblivion of all my axioms and loosening of priors, has maybe made of me an ambivalent observer in all this pain. Rivers of blood flowing at my ankles as I laugh, because I've somehow begun to believe in life eternal. And so, maybe, I'm just watching an infinite consciousness playing war games with itself. Because peace eventually gets boring. You can be a pacifist and still like paintball. Like, I want to destroy you at chess. You know, if we play a game, ultimately, it doesn't matter who wins, but till the end, I will engage with all the ferocity needed to obliterate you. What can I say? I'm a big fan of the board game Risk, and I want me those extra 7 men per round. Perhaps I am a fool, for all this pain is not a game but real. Sudan is currently embroiled in a brutal civil war. Myanmar has been engulfed in a severe conflict since the military coup in February 2021. And what about the Sahel region and Yemen? Every country dealing with all sorts of crap each day, every day. Conflicts erupting all over the place like boils on our skin, and the world demands us to either participate or ignore it. Those who participate are furious over those who ignore, and those who ignore do so for their own mental health, as it's clearly poisoning those who participate in the game with no resolution. Hmm. Each and every conflict with its own catalyst, each catalyst with its own catalyst. As surely as we hear the blood in our ears, the echoes of 1,000,000 midnight shrieks of monkeys, whose last sight of the world was the eyes of a panther, have their traces in our nervous systems. A little excerpt from The Others, How Animals Made Us Human by Paul Shepard. If my life is indeed occurring in some matrix-like fashion for audience members higher up on the Kardashev scale of technology, they might have watched my story being projected on the big screen, and they would know what caused my descent into day zero. For sometimes things happen to a character without them seeing, oblivious. And by the time they try to make sense of it, it's too late. They've crossed that bridge, and all that remains are corrupted memories. Every day, I would write journals in an attempt to give voice to all my sub-personalities, all the different people that I could become. As the chaos of a world in identity crisis raged fires and burned cities, protests about race, sex, unemployment, and inequality were rising all over the place, only offering grey tones to things that were no longer just black and white. Literally. When I was at a Black Lives Matter protest in Los Angeles, I marched with a crowd consisting of black and white people facing a police force of black and white officers. Needless to say, my primitive and fertile brain wasn't too sure what to make of that confusing separation. It was almost comical if it wasn't so sad. In the movie Civil War, directed by Alex Garland, a machine gun is pointed at someone on their knees who says, "I'm American." To which the disgruntled soldier replies, "Yeah, but what kind of American are you?" It seems the Turing test applies for humans as much as it does robots. As I was rebuilding from my memory loss, I would trust my internal dialogue, but I had to get feedback from the external world to test out my avatar. I would take this character I was molding onto the streets and meet folks so that by trial and tribulations I could tweak and adjust as needed based on my personal dynamic risk assessment. What are the dangers outside and inside of me? All these components required my attention and collaboration if I am to construct an identity fit to play on a global stage. There are close to 8 billion people in the world, and I have to assume that each and every one of you is as complex and alive as me. There is much danger to thinking I am in my own dream, and you're all projections of my subconscious, or NPCs in my own video game. Because maybe one day I will be hungry for violence, and everyone would become my plaything. Because if nothing matters, why not let the chimera out of its cage? Fear and dread is actually funny when you're terrifying dolls without self-awareness. A piece of promenade theatre with animatronic puppets. That is a dangerous territory for me to consider, and yet it has a slice in the pie chart of my reality. And so, for my health and for those around me, I have to assume you're all just as real. And so, perhaps, there is some sort of resolution to my story. It's hard to know what to believe when there is so much going on all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is maybe why people say ignorance is bliss. Yum, yum, yum. Maybe one day I'll be met with a moment that will align so drastically with the trauma of that fateful self-destruction that it'll feel as though there was a reason for it. Like in the movie Signs, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Mel Gibson's character, a former priest, numb and faithless from the death of his wife when a drunk driver crashed into her. Her last words, nonsensical, gibberish, left him cold and alone, abandoned by God. Until, near the end, the sentence echoed as instructions on how to save his children. Suddenly, he felt connected again to her, to the universe, to God. Maybe, maybe one day I'll discover why God ripped my heart out. For now, I've accepted my epistemological limitations, and perhaps that satisfies the second element for the ending of a story: character growth. Who am I? That was quite the question I had to answer. According to the ID I found in my pocket, my name is Eric Roy Lampere. Those mean eternal ruler, king, and bright territory. Words which were significant when I was losing my mind and reconstructing it. Perhaps unimportant, but maybe carefully calculated by people before me on the family tree, like the cult in the movie Hereditary. In Dan Schreiber's book, The Theory of Everything Else, he writes that Chapman believed it was his destiny to kill John Lennon. Many coincidences kept presenting themselves to confirm this, like the fact that the gun he bought in a Hawaii shop to kill Lennon was sold to him by an extremely helpful store clerk called Mr. Ono, as in Yoko. Names are powerful and can be very influential in your life's decisions. There is a theory called normative determinism, a term coined by New Scientist journalist John Hoyland, which refers to the theory that a person's name is given an influential role in reflecting key attributes of their job, profession, or general life. So who is this me, this Eric I am supposedly in control of? Who am I among all of these people? Hmm? Should I should I have been so vulnerable and share myself with people on this podcast? Perhaps certain things should be kept secret. Maybe even sprinkle some misleading clues just to keep myself safe from anyone wanting to use information against me. I don't know. Born of parents from different places, forced to move from one country to another in my developmental years, learning many languages so that I could better be understood, and yet every time shunned for being the one who is different. My life was like a constant close encounters of the third culture kid. How can it be cultural appropriation when it's my culture to appropriate cultures? From what I've seen myself do, I appear to absorb the environment so that I may better reflect it back at itself. A walking mirror, some sort of biological pacification drone. And as far as I'm concerned, it's cultural appreciation. All the better to camouflage with. And Grandma, what big eyes you have. The better to see you with, my dear. Life, no doubt, is confusing. The same week that I went to a Black Lives Matter protest, I saw someone needing a lift home. So I offered him a ride. A bald-headed chap with a grey handlebar moustache, wearing all white. Oh, we talked, and he found my British accent amusing, and I asked him where he'd just come from, and he reveals that he'd just come out of prison. Oh, okay. That's right, brother. 25 years. Oh, oh, wow. That's a long time. Some might call that a life sentence because I believe the man in my passenger seat probably did a murder. But hey, let's not judge one another. We must learn to forgive. Gosh, is he a reflection of me or an antithesis? Oh, either way, don't mention the Black Lives Matter protest you went to. I continue to chat with him. I mean, I don't have a choice. I'm in a car with a murderer on the freeway, accelerating a little bit more just to get him home sooner rather than later. Wow, 25 years, that is a long time. That's as long as a prefrontal cortex takes to develop. What? Nothing. It just, it must have been difficult. It was okay. He says, "I'm part of the Aryan Brotherhood, so we look out for each other." Oh, wow, what lovely news! Oh, gosh. He introduced me to some heavy metal music, and as we arrived at the trailer park, suddenly it struck me. I am in a video game. It's like in Grand Theft Auto. You know when you meet a new, albeit questionable character who offers you missions? At that point, I got super excited. He asked for my number, and I gladly give it to him. And I make my merry way home. I tell my housemates, "Oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me last night." Oh, the silliest thing. They're aware of my video game reality delusion. And after telling them, they're in shock. What, the silliest thing? That's not silly, that's dangerous. They're clearly upset and worried. Yeah, right, yeah, okay, of course, yeah. Yeah, that's just one of the problems, when someone has no grounding in reality anymore. I'm prone to danger, willing to step into the darkness, and maybe people will think that they can take advantage of me because I'm this puppy-like adventurer, excited and eager for action. But what most people don't realize is that underneath my smiling, quiet face is someone who's made friends with death. I uh I recently saw the movie Meet Joe Black, and it was frustratingly relatable. The prison man gave me a call a few days later for a driving job, and it took a lot for me to say no. I really wanted to play, but ideally not with a bigot. So, sometimes I like to think about the life that version of me is having right now. Either his corpse is cramped in a suitcase, thrown in a ditch, or in prison, hopefully not holding someone's pocket. Or, and I like this version better, a crime lord, kingpin of all sorts of naughty, equal opportunity soldiers. Whatever and whoever I am is still a little mysterious to me, but I like it. I like what I am for now. One thing that resonated with me is a letter that John Baptiste Leroy in 1789 wrote. No. Benjamin Franklin wrote it to John Baptiste Leroy in 1789. Our new constitution is now established and has an appearance that promises permanency. But in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. That's a pretty popular saying, often paraphrased as nothing is certain except death and taxes. The trouble is, I don't really perceive death as a finality anymore. It's no longer this event to fear or even maybe avoid. Which means I am now apprehensive about filling in my taxes. It's perhaps a risky route to walk, but when the IRS finally come knocking on my door, if they ever do, if they ever find us, I'll have quite the story to tell them on why I'm behind on payments. Maybe I could even convert them to my gang. Who knows? But one lesson I've learned is that we gotta carpe that diem, as Rick Sanchez says. To live is to risk it all. Otherwise, you're just an inert chunk of randomly assembled molecules that's drifting wherever the universe blows you. Hey, you bunch of nerds. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And thank you so much if you've made it through the entire series as well. I really appreciate your time. Get in touch with me on my Instagram, artist formerly known as Eric. I'd really love to hear your thoughts and where you're listening from, etc., etc. And yeah, give this podcast a like and subscribe, and then maybe share it with one of your pals. I'd really love that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Bye-bye. Emotional closure, some thematic reinforcement, and maybe a surprise twist and a sense of continuation. I think back to a time when I was at my grandma's house. He would often go in the attic during his adolescence, a welcome stroll down memory lane, uncovering nostalgic artifacts to flashback me to happier times. His Tintin figurine, along with a collection of Belgian and French comic books, the box of assorted Lego pieces, remnants of his Pog collection, which brought out the con man in him as he tricked kids on the playground with rules he invented so he could collect a mighty bounty. Dozens of knickknacks with time-traveling abilities, which were once adored but now appeared to him as possible merchandise for eBay to pay off some debts. He explores his family's personal Hangar 51 to find the missing pieces to his jigsaw. If this were a movie, Maybe now he'd wear a trench coat and a Panama hat with film noir music accompanying the scene. At least the lighting is fitting for the uncanny atmosphere in detective films of the black and white era. The sun is pushing through the small Johari window in the ceiling, shining a girder of light through the dusty soup he wades in, as if he were deep water diving into the murky depths of a sunken ship looking for treasure. The benefit of birthing a new atemporal identity is the aloofness of it all. Everything appears as new. This buffoon in the attic plays with the ray of light, sliding his fingers within, creating shadows of Morse code melodies, gliding his hand through the air, paying close attention to the perturbation of the chalky particles flooding the vacuum left in his trail, whirlpools of pale dots finding balance in the suspended sunbeam. Is this what is meant by being present? At this moment, he could spend eons admiring the cosmic clusters of dust hovering about him, as if nothing else mattered outside this room. But he can feel his eyes shifting to other locations and change focus without his permission, like it's looking for something, hunting. His eyes flicker to the tower of boxes upon boxes, stacked and looming overhead, growing from the floor of books and photo albums. One of the cardboard crates captures his attention, marked École. That's French for school. He pulls this box from underneath a mountain of other boxes, letting them drop in its place like Tetris line. He opens the lid, revealing a series of notebooks from across ages, many in dialect he no longer uses. He picks one of them up, and out slides a child's drawing of his family, 3 two-dimensional humans and their dog. Their limbs, lines sticking out of a main potato-esque body with grotesque, bright pink heads, smiling. Atop the picture, the Flemish words, "Dat is mijn familie," and his name. My name. I don't remember drawing that. And I no longer remember speaking that language, but that is definitely my family. With the father in vivid checkered clothing and helmet whip combo, which is how the child once knew his dad from his occasional return from being a jockey. That happened to be comedy goldmine for his son's future stand-up career. What with his lanky height soaring over his Lilliputian father and his gargantuan gums mimicking the animals he'd take out for a ride. These gums are so big. Somebody once heckled, "Go on, Seabiscuit," and that was before he told them that his dad was a jockey. The comedy gods made this setup very easy for him to gather punchlines, granting him a dad who slaps horses' butts for money, like some equestrian pimp with his quadruped sluts. The sound of laughter echoes in his mind, and the comedian is transported, still a beginner, on stage, back in the spotlight, speaking fast from anxious energy.
He's so small that if I'm out and about with him, like around town, people think that he's my son that suffers from that aging disease, you know? And people come up to me in the street and they don't want to look directly at him to not offend him, right? And they go, "Oh my God, he's so brave. What's his name?" Dad. That's an unusual name. Well, it runs in the family. And I don't mind. I quite like having a jockey dad. But it was weird growing up because he'd be like, how can you take your jockey dad seriously? You're supposed to look up to your dad, not down, right? Go clean your room. No, fuck you, Dad. Clean your room. That's how I talked to him when I was 6. Fuck off. My dad's like not a jockey anymore. He's a sort of farmer. He's too old. And I say sort of farmer because like I don't know why. He's got one of each. That's not how you farm, Dad, right? He's got one horse, one chicken, one dog. Just imagine Noah after the divorce, right?
You know, it's odd to think my dad had a career in sports. I always saw it as a piece of theatre. You know, a well-dressed audience in oversized hats heckling the dozens of players going around a story circle. The jockeys in their silly, colourful costumes get weighed before the show to make sure they're not too fat for the catwalk, before slapping meat between their thighs for the enjoyment of paying customers. Theatre. Perhaps my disinterest came from jealousy that his job took him away from us. Maybe I was too young to see the attraction of witnessing human beings, actual people, riding at bone-breaking speeds among a herd of powerful beasts, connecting with the river of nostril flaring and metallic hooves, too young to appreciate the bond between rider and their horse counterpart. Man at one with nature. I suppose it was all too perplexing from a child's perspective. The confusion went as far as me pointing to horses in a field as we drove by and calling them papa. And what with being born in France, I did participate in a cuisine that sometimes fed my dad's mode of transport. If your dad drives for Uber, you wouldn't eat the wheel of his Prius. His absence was offset with the feeling that he would defend me at all costs. After a detention for not being able to solve an algebraic equation, a teacher who failed to make me understand slapped the answer into me with one swift strike to the face. All I learned that day was being stupid was a bad thing. Yet I was never able to resolve the equation. To this day, my mathematics skills are less than desirable. 1 plus 1 is 2, but it also equals 1 because 2 is its own thing. It is one whole. 2 is 1, so is 3, and so on. I ran home with tears streaming down my face and told my parents. "I'll drive you to school tomorrow," my dad calmly replied. He never usually drove me. I assume it's because he struggled to reach the pedals. We arrive at school, and he walks out with me for the first time, taking me to the playground. "Who's the teacher that hit you?" he asks. I point like a little snitch. My dad confidently walks over to my teacher and grabs him by the throat and raises him off the ground. All the kids gather around in awe of my father. "If you hit my kid or any other kid again, I'll come back and kill you. Understand?" Bit much, Dad. Bit too Shakespearean. "If it be true thee hitteth my own issue again, laying thy hands on his fleshy crust, I shall trample thee with 1,000 horses." Also, you grabbed the wrong teacher. The act of bravery made up for how distant he was, away chasing his dream on the back of a racehorse. It was hard for me and my mum to keep up, but luckily we had long legs. You can't get rid of us that easily. We returned to the child's drawing, to the pile of school scribblings, and continued to look around for anything that might jog his memories and return him to a life in which amnesia isn't the baseline. This feeling of peering over the edge of an infinite void where thoughts of suicide isn't an escape but an entrance. To exit the world in which the faces of loved ones are no longer trusted, for they are strangers. The strangest of sensation, that to return home might be to die. He looks at one of the wardrobes in the attic, the one that holds his grandfather's pistol, stashed in a crate of ammo, hidden among stockpiles of ancient belongings, and a new memory came flooding back as he hears his theatre professor explaining Chekhov's gun to the class. "It's foreshadowing," she explains. "If the audience is introduced to a gun in the first act, it should be fired in the next or final act. Every element in a story must be necessary, and anything irrelevant, all the deadwood, must be removed." He stays fixed on the wardrobe with the hidden gun and wonders if it's a harbinger of things to come. He's in this story after all, but has no idea what is and isn't of relevance anymore. "Maybe all my work is one long indulgent suicide letter. Lol." He turns away, closes his eyes, and inhales deep to brush away internal distractions. And when he reopens his eyes, he sees an item in which he had long forgotten, a prop which brought him much fear as a child, and paralyzed him from going upstairs in this house. The porcelain doll in the red Victorian dress. It's curious how little about the world we know when we're children. We don't have much of a frame of reference to make an informed point of view on what is and isn't truth, or question whether or not the guardianship we receive is applying the best method. We're these tiny little hard drive with legs, collecting as much data as possible in order to survive our environments, learning from all the senses and storing the lessons as memories across multiple territories of our brain, with some events having such impact that it generates a type of human with its own version of all things. He stares at her, the porcelain doll in a red Victorian dress, who stares right back at him with her cold, lifeless eyes, black eyes like a shark's eyes. He used to hate the upper floor of his grandma's house, where the three sisters' bedrooms were. They actually belonged to his mother and her two younger siblings, but the proximity and age confused things a little. The laughter from the audience re-emerges, and the comedian continues his stand-up routine, clutching the microphone like an audible sword. There was 7 years difference between my parents, which isn't a lot. 7 years isn't a vast age gap, is it? He beckons an answer out the front row who shakes their heads. But it's a little tricky when you consider my mum was pregnant with me at the age of 15. An accidental gasp is heard from the darkness. Yeah, 7 years is a lot now, because that makes my dad 8 years old. The comedian gags as if disgusted by this revelation, enjoying the roars from the crowd, which is distinctly louder because of the beat. The briefest of pauses in the rhythm of the punchline, an almost indistinguishable ellipsis to give the audience a chance to do the calculations themselves, to hear the number 22 in their heads before getting the carpet pulled from underneath their feet. A ridiculous gag that his dad was a child. Just joking, he was in fact 22 years old, which technically makes him a paedophile. In some countries. In other countries, he could have been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama, or Elvis Presley, maybe. He observes the audience to see who begins to squirm at the troublesome topic. But my dad was a smart sexual predator. He seduced my mother in France where it's legal. Smart. He continues, tapping his side of his head just to show where the brain lives. Smart. The little micro expressions of uneasiness among the grinning faces to see who thinks I'm being serious. I mean, sure, it stems from a source of truth, but painting beautiful pictures requires a touch of illusion, and the job of a joker is to harness laughter from wells sometimes deep. I can see some of you uncomfortable with the subject matter, he acknowledges, but remember, I'm allowed to talk about it because I'm technically half paedophile. One of my favorite jokes. It's in my family tree, so I'm allowed to talk about it. My young mother, his beautiful, brilliant mum, she pushed this thing out of her, me, a baby, and asked her mum if she could play with it. You can play with your son once you've done your homework. That's why he thought of them as the three sisters. They played, dressing him in costumes, makeup, and wigs, creating, manipulating, performing. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. And there were the pranks too. Jokes came in all forms, and not everybody laughs, right? Because a jump scare, for example, uses the same technique as a setup punchline. And when you're on the receiving end, both sides may not agree on what is and isn't funny. His mother knew he was scared of dolls. He once saw a horror movie, or maybe it was just a trailer. It might have been Child's Play. He doesn't remember. But the idea of dolls coming to life and killing him became a possibility. It doesn't matter what Seneca says about we suffer more in imagination than reality, because from his perspective, and certainly a child's, imagination is reality. Needless to say, with this fear and the availability of dolls in this house full of women, she saw the opportunity for a good chuckle. She hid under his bed one night with the porcelain doll in the red Victorian dress and a kitchen knife, and waited, patiently, like a crocodile hovering near the angle of an approaching thrust the killer doll and the murderous weapon in his direction with a piercing shriek. The knife wasn't needed. Overkill. A screeching doll who can suddenly move was plenty to unsettle me. He cries and pees in his pajamas as she rolls from underneath the bed, cackling. Oh, you should have been there. A memory was seared into the very flesh of his medial temporal lobe. Oh, will this give him psychosexual problems when puberty hits? I don't know. Let's find out. He looked around his bedroom as if to say, Sorry, who's looking after me? Is someone going to yell cut soon? I was too young to realize that she herself was a child wanting to play. But analysis of the event will come later. Hypnotherapy would do the healing and the reuniting. Antidepressants and tadalafil would balance out the chemicals. For now, this little boy suddenly had his fears become a reality and phobia came creeping in. The real meaning of the word phobia, the kind which petrified and made him see things that weren't there. Hallucinations, claws in the subconscious, now hardwired to look for threat in anything non-human with a face that might all of a sudden spring to life and seek sweat, blood, and tears. As the sisters got older, so did their taste, relegating their dolls to the spare room. the Blue Room, on account of the blue wallpaper, which was where he would sleep during visits, but was now too afraid to approach. So he'd sleep downstairs on the sofa, watching cassette after cassette of movies recorded from TV or the odd rental from Blockbuster. I was the epitome of a latchkey kid. One stormy night, a trite thunderbolt takes out the power in the house. Grandma emerges out of her downstairs room with a candle to find and send him upstairs to fetch some batteries from the Blue Room. He protests, but with little results. She hands him the candlestick and makes his way upstairs. Flickering flame, forming, convulsing shadows all around him as he edges closer to the forbidden zone at the end of the corridor, trying to avoid part of the wooden floor that creaked, terrified to look behind him. Step by step, bit by bit, wanting to run, but bound to a slow pace for fear of extinguishing the only light in the house. He grabs the cold metal handle and twists it, letting the door swing open as he remains safe in the corridor. And when we film this, we'll place the camera inside the room so the door frame cages him, and the bright corridor will stand out in stark contrast to the darkness of the room. His silhouette, trapped in a frame within a frame. Oh, that'll be some nice composition. A wall of cool air drops on him from inside. The fire quivers, and his breath stops. Goosebumps cascade down his body and his heartbeat quickens, reminding him that time is of the essence. He bravely enters, reluctantly steps in, popping a chair in front of the door so the demonic dolls lined along the shelves couldn't just shut it with their minds. I mean, he'd seen enough horror movies at this point to know the rules. He's not an idiot. He treads deeper in, nearing the cabinets, peeks under the bed. This was a lesson he learned the hard way, and opens the drawer, rustling through the contents to find the batteries. Lightning bolts occasionally thundering through the cut-up windows and reflecting in all their eyes. All those dolls towering above him, looking at him. Thankfully, he promptly finds the batteries, slams the drawer shut, kicks the chair out of the way, and with one fell swoop pulls the door behind him, making sure the bulking mechanism clicks into the strike plate, audibly confirming it is fully closed. Whew, safe. He takes a deep inhale in, and it reinvigorates him, as if he was holding his breath this whole time. He makes his way to the staircase, and just as he takes a step down, he hears a voice coming from behind him. A voice that didn't sound like his own, gruff and deliberate. "There's one behind you." Fear doesn't make logic an ally. Perhaps while I was looking for the batteries, one of them slithered out of the open door of the blue jail and waited in the obscurity for their human host to come out. I think I remember, the sound of little footsteps running on the floorboards, but I just can't be sure if it was external or an internal sound. And now, knowing what I know of memory, maybe it's non-diegetic sound to complement the horror of this evening. He turns to check and see what it is, and there she was, a Poupée en Rouge, the porcelain doll in a red Victorian dress, swaying the dim remnants of the candlelight from my end of the corridor. I mean, it had to be a hallucination, a figment of his imagination, but it was a delusion that he could clearly see breathing, one that had taken shape in the space he existed in. He could see her even more clearly when the lightning crashed through the window, her shadow lengthening from her feet to his. "What's the worst thing that can happen?" asks anxiety. The doll charges towards him, sprinting, screeching an unearthly sound. He turns to run, trips down the stairs, the light extinguishes as he falls. The tumbling calls out for my grandmother, who finds me covered in nosebleeds and candle wax. "I got the batteries." She pulls me out, away from the silhouette standing at the top of the staircase. He vowed never to go in that room again. The comedian is on stage, and the blue light used for the previous section fades and returns to the Fresnel lighting. I eventually forgot my fears because my parents and I would move around so much that I was overloaded with new experiences, new cultures, languages, smells, music, tastes, distractions, new stimuli feeding my hungry, developing brain. It was also around the time I was busy teaching myself how to masturbate. My schedule was packed. After having earned the trust of the audience with fast-paced gags at the beginning of the show, he turns to long-form suspense to potentially reach a better orgasm. I began my sexual odyssey by rubbing myself against a mattress. The discovery was accidental. I'm a restless sleeper, and moving around caused a funny kind of friction. The real magic started when I became infatuated with my pillows. He takes out a mime cigarette and burns the tip with an invisible Zippo lighter, breathing in a hiatus and then letting the smoke billow out from his nostril and watching it rise through the space like poured milk in a cup of tea. The presentation made all the better by him sitting on a stool like a beat poet might, as double bass strings keep tempo. As I got older, so did my tastes. Making love to pillows were the perfect human substitutes to be found in the home. We used to pack up and leave so often that IKEA became my red light district. All the pillows had sexy Swedish names. Ooh, Roleka. Memory foam, huh? Well, you're gonna remember tonight, honey. The technician washes the stage with a hue of velvet as the comedian looks off into the distance. I really had quite the love affair with pillows, I can tell you. The next summer I spent at my grandmother's house, I broke my vow. I went back into the blue room, where all the dolls lived. He gets up from his stool and kicks the invisible door down. Well, 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 ladies. Look who's returned a man. I'm 12 years old now. I'm not afraid of you anymore. He takes a drag from his cigarette, blows it out flirtatiously, and proudly looks at his audience. I fucked all those dolls. A beat to allow the audience to soak in that confession. The blue room was now my brothel. If you had a black light, it would look like Jackson Pollock and come everywhere. He groans, pouts, and lifts up an eyebrow. I even had sex with the teddy bears and they had nothing to do with it. I was becoming a monster. The comedian shields his face and turns away from the audience. Any toy's a sex toy if you fuck it. That's what I told myself anyway. Hungry, hungry hippos? No, we're not hungry, they'd yell. But I gave them no choice. He thumbs the mimed plastic tail of the beast to rejig the memory of people aware of the game, so they can better visualize the colourful mammal gobbling up the effluvia from his gyrating microphone. Are you enjoying my art? He asks the audience, who crescendo nicely along to his premise, unsure where the line between truth and poetry lies. It's at this height he drops the closing line. Just as the lights return to the usual flood, composing himself gracefully. That's how I got over my fear, he says. I chose love. They laugh at the stupidity, the simplicity, as if it were that easy. The scene fades, and he is back in the attic, left looking at the porcelain doll in the red Victorian dress, collecting dust, strangely feeling sorry for the marionette. He'd only been looking at her for a couple of seconds, but a dam burst open that slowed down time. He picks up some photo albums as well as notebooks, eager to leave this part of the house, and returns downstairs. The attic is where he found the cursed wedding ring his father offered his mother, but was declined. The ring which he used to bend the knee for his divorce. She deserved better, but he was afraid of spending what little money he had saved up, oblivious to what such an item symbolized. How careless. How tormenting to learn lessons too late. He turns to look at the attic one more time, grateful for its existence. Separation is hard, wouldn't you agree? Divorce may have been a legal severance, but it doesn't feel like a spiritual one. Quite the opposite. But don't tell her I said that. While trauma can be hell on earth, trauma resolved can be a gift from the gods, writes Peter A. Levine and Anne Frederick in their book Waking the Tiger. I suppose there's some emotional closure there, some thematic reinforcement too. I didn't tie all the loose ends in this series. I don't really know if Shakespeare wrote all his works, but it's easier to agree that he did. And today's Avril Lavigne might be a doppelganger, who knows? I have computer renderings and plaster molds of my face out there, so when I die, it wouldn't be hard to recreate a new me if the world so desperately wanted me back. As for eating chocolate cake if it had been farted on, well, I suppose it all depends on whose butt cheeks it is. And what of the surprise twist and the sense of continuation? Well, every ending is a beginning. From the tomb of the womb to the womb of the tomb. So, a surprise twist. Well, maybe the script that I wrote, which predicted or manifested the pandemic, turns into a zombie apocalypse. I'm just saying. That might be foreshadowing. Just be prepared. Or not. That's part of the fun, is it not? Let this first series be exposition to the character I am to be for the foreseeable. We all face a strange and unknown future, which is best put by Stephen Fry during a conversation with John Cleese. We are children playing on the beach making sandcastles, with our back to the sea. And in the sea, various currents are combining. They are, for example, bio-augmentation, brain-machine interfacing, so it reads your thoughts and you can control it with your mind, robotics itself, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence of different kinds, nanomaterials, and so on. All of these technologies, which are transformative on their own, not to mention genomics and gene editing, are like separate swells in the ocean that are combining to make a gigantic tsunami. And as I say, we are playing on the beach, wondering about little things like this particular strike, or what names we call ourselves, what our identities are, these tiny little issues that we are obsessing over. And at that point, John Cleese concludes, so you mean life will be transformed in a way that we can't even begin to guess at? Precisely. There might be some comfort in the guiding hand of a director in this mess we all live in. I really like this passage in the opening scene of the movie Tar, starring Cate Blanchett, in which she portrays a great conductor of musical orchestra. Time is the thing. Time is the essential piece of interpretation. You cannot start without me. I start the clock. My left hand shapes, but my right hand, the second hand, marks time and moves it forward. However, unlike a clock, sometimes my second hand stops, which means time stops. The illusion is that, like you, I'm responding to the orchestra in real time and making a decision about the right moment to restart the thing, or reset it, or throw time out of the window altogether. The reality is that from the very beginning, I know precisely what time it is, and the exact moment we will arrive at our destination together. And finally, a sense of continuation. Well, this podcast starts again on the 21st of October, 2024. I don't know if I had to say that. Unless something major happens to disrupt the harmony. And you will be glad to hear, finally, that I have some awesome guests lined up to join me on this golden thread, so that we may get inspired and learn a little about their lives and their perspective on the admiration and creation of art. I'm very excited. Make sure to share this podcast with people you think would like it. Send them a particular episode if you have one in mind. Thank you for being part of this, and see you soon. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die, baby. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I love me some classical music. So I thought I'd leave you on some Morning Mood by Grieg. Enjoy.